Hello, sinners.
Welcome.
We are back. Episode 2.
Actually, it's episode 3.
The first one doesn't really count. That was
Okay.
just an intro. This is, full episode number 2.
Okay. Fine.
All right. So I am Teresa Wallace. I'm the manager of special projects, and you're...
I am Megan Halverson. I'm an autism and emotional behavioral disorder specialist, and I work on the consultation team at 916.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about simple ways to include students with a special education label. And I'm going to say that that's not what we were going to title this, but students who are termed as being in special ed is not a place. Special ed is a label to identify needs. And if you don't agree with that, please turn us off. Or maybe stay so that we can change your mind. Maybe that's a better way to say it because, growth mindsets. Here we go. All right. So let's define inclusion. Go for it, Megan.
Perfect. When I think about inclusion, I think about belonging, right? We want to be part of that classroom. We want to be participating, and we want to be involved in that learning together. So staff, students coming together and being one. It's about building those environments where every student feels connected and is belonging to that classroom. We want our students to be seen, supported, and successful.
No small feat.
No small feat, but
Right.
we can do it. We can do it.
All right. So where do we start?
I think the most important thing that we need to start with is student strengths, right? We want to be mindful of what students bring to the table. What are their strengths? And we talked about in our last episode, where do we find that information? One, we can talk to them, but we also take a ton of data. So looking at student IEPs, looking at their evaluation reports, talking to families. That's how we're going to get that information.
Doing an updated student interest survey, if you have that information or if you gather that information annually at least for your students. Just knowing what they're interested in and access points for your students, that's really key information.
Yeah, when we know those strengths and those interests, we can build from. Thinking about those communication strengths. How does your student learn best? Are they a hands-on learner? Do they learn best visually or auditorily? How do we leverage that when we're thinking about those shared activities within our classroom?
Let me back up. I said interest survey. You're talking about strengths. They are two very different things, so I don't want to confuse our listeners. Interests are things that you can build upon for students to engage better or to potentially leverage their attention or different points like that, right? Like you build a lesson around Harry Potter because the student's really interested in that, or like a visual so that they can engage. That's very different than talking about student strengths. And they can be aligned, but they're not the same thing. And I feel like I just confused us a little bit. So I wanted to clarify that.
Thanks for that. Because you're right. They can be aligned because they build from each other, right? Like if I know that the student does really well with writing, but writing is hard at times. So maybe I pull in that student interest of Harry Potter or Disney characters. And that's what they're writing that prompt about, right? So you can use them in conjunction, which really is going to be increasing that overall motivation.
Yeah, but I feel like having clarity over which version you're talking about so that when you're saying it might not be a student skill strength, but it's a student interest that they are highly motivated by, which therefore you're leveraging one with the other. That can be a very powerful combination.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. It not only fosters that respect, that motivation, but just that confidence and that overall well-being. I want to be here. It feels good. And that's what we want students to be feeling.
Well, and when you're talking about generalization of skills, you might have been working really hard in your resource room setting or in your center-based setting to transfer a very particular type of skill into an inclusion classroom or their gen ed classroom. And doing that based on interest or based on something that the student is going to find motivating is going to help when you're transferring that into a new setting with new people.
100%.
All right. So talking about people.
All right. The other piece that I think is so important is thinking about who are our adult anchors in the classroom. And when I think of adult anchors, I want to think about those people that bring structure, predictability, that overall calmness within the environment.
Yeah, so is adult anchor like a term for a particular type of person, or are you just defining that generally?
Great question. I think it could be both, right? And so when I think about who is going to be an adult anchor, I think who is leading the classroom? Does that student have a connection? Who are the support staff helping? And so thinking about maybe we have 2 or 3 of them, right? But thinking about who are those people that can be that supportive presence for that.
So they might be overt for a student that you're making a very particular generalization plan for, or like transfer of skill. They might be more covert if they're just a person who generally has those skills and is going to be modeling them anyway and is in that space.
Right.
Okay.
And I think I love how you said modeling, right? Is because we need to be really emphasize that modeling piece. We need to show what that safety looks like, that consistency. We need to talk through problems. We need to practice learning in public, model those strategies to support our own well-being. And when I think about adult anchors, that's really what they're doing. They maintain that structure of routines and those clear expectations. They're that model for that student. They're predictable.
So when you're talking about an anchor adult as either the case manager or the related service provider or administrator, when you're setting this student up to be successful, you might want to prep them with what this looks like for this student, how they've learned the skill, what it might look like for them to engage in the skill in that space, so that that student can be successful, and they might need a little bit more specific support in engaging in that in their space, putting some visuals on their desk, doing these other things, right? You've seen that in a variety of ways, and you also want that to be as naturalized as possible in that space.
Right.
Yeah.
And also think about those easy things. When you brought up that student interest survey, like if I know that you're really interested in Harry Potter, I am going to make sure that peer anchor knows that, because that's a natural way to start that communication, build that rapport, and to, engage that student in a conversation that's comfortable too.
Gotcha. You shifted to peer anchor that time. Was that intentional, Megan?
Not intentional, but sometimes my mind goes very fast. So that is a good segue to talking about peer anchors. And really what we're thinking about with peer anchors are those natural models for inclusion, right? We don't want them to be helpers. We want them to be part of the classroom and partners in learning. And when we think of peer anchors, that's something that we want to be really mindful of. You're not helping this student, but you're going to be collaborating with the student. You're going to be.
Why don't you want them to be helpers?
I think we don't want to victimize our students. We don't want to put our own bias into, helping them. Because when you think about it, both students can benefit from working with each other, right?
Yep.
And so they're working together. When I think about those natural peer anchors, I think about what is their role, right?
Yeah.
What are we going to teach them to do? Because it's important to teach them. And so thinking about finding those students that, one, want to support others and collaborate with others is going to be important. But then talking to them about strategies to include. How do you bring people to your group? How do you model those classroom rules or expectations? How do you redirect if something pops up? Or how do you get the adult to help?
Those hidden curriculum pieces from your classroom, those pieces that are not necessarily explicitly taught, pieces that our students can miss, especially those students who aren't there all the time.
Right.
They're going to miss it.
Yep. And when you bring up hidden curriculum, Teresa, that's so important, because how are we teaching? First, being mindful of what are those hidden curriculum pieces in my classroom. I remember being in college and not knowing where to turn something in because I didn't see it. And I was new to the classroom. So I missed that intro day. And I was like, I'm missing things here. And so I had to ask somebody. But if I didn't have that skill, and I would be sitting there frustrated, overwhelmed. And so, again, that's where those peer anchors or those helpers can come in, or their support people can come in and navigate that with me. And so
there's only so many social stories you can write.
Right.
And it's not ever going to explain all of the context. So teaching them, number one, that it's okay to ask someone, and two, that it's not only the adults that can help you, right? We're teaching that piece of that peer-to-peer interaction and who might be a safe person. Like,
Yeah.
what does that look like
Right.
from a peer? Not just the adults. And not all adults have those skills, and they're not all the same. So making sure that they can identify a peer who might be a good fit for that is also a skill.
100%. And thinking about too, like, I'm not with you for the entire year, but also rotating people. Our students want to be helpers. And so leveraging that to our benefit can really create that cohesive social environment for all students.
Let's talk about one of my favorite topics. I love structure.
I know you do.
I obsess over structured spaces.
Yep.
We teach trainings based on structured concepts, right?
Yep.
Structured teaching, teach principles that comes out of autism research, but it is good, important learning for all students. All adults, all humans benefit from environmental structures, visual structures, clarity of rules, clarity of expectations, clarity in spaces, right? So when you're thinking about inclusion and you're thinking about clarity of spaces, you walk into a space, no matter which type of space you're thinking about, and you're reading the room, right? You walk into a conference and you're like, whoa, this is a massive space. Where am I going to sit in order to set myself up to be successful? How do you want to learn best in that space, right? Students don't get to choose in a lot of our spaces. Maybe by high school, you're getting to choose some of those autonomous courses and whatever else, but they're typically like in lines and whatever else, right? So thinking about how you're setting up your learning environment includes a lot of physical structure, and a lot of special ed classes and special education spaces or the breakout spaces. You have to leverage environmental structure in order to best utilize those spaces for practicality and for the unspoken kind of layers of what's possible for those students that you don't have to then just add more visuals to, right? Like, okay, well, I'm going to structure it so they automatically use this space this way.
Yep.
So that's like when you walk into the airport, you're immediately kind of funneled into certain ways if it's set up well. Because they have to funnel tens of thousands of humans, right? So they want to narrow your scope and then they widen it again,
100%.
right? After security.
Right.
So you got to kind of think about environmental design as how do you want people to use your space? And when you then think about inclusion layered on top of that, can you tell I'm passionate about this topic?
I like it.
When you layer inclusion on top of that and you're thinking about students who access your spaces for shorter periods of time, what are they going to need in your space? How are they going to access it? How are they going to exit it? And what are they going to need while they're there, right? Are they're going to need a break space to not exit, but to like stay? It makes me think about all of the spaces and how you would need to structure that for universal design for everyone.
Right.
While also thinking about the students that don't use it as much as the rest of your students do.
Right. And in saying that, I think we have to be mindful of the goal, right? Is we want our students to be as independent as they can.
Yep.
And we want the environment to allow for that independence, right? I know that when I go into that conference room and my name says, oh, Megan Halverson, you are sitting at table 10 at this seat, my anxiety goes down. I see the agenda. I know what's expected. I know when my break is. I know what the topics are. I can tell if I have any activities where I have to get up and socialize, right? So I can prepare myself. And so we want to be explicit with our structure. We want students to know what's expected. And we want to be mindful of going back again to that hidden curriculum. With entering that space, with that structure, are there things that our students need to know? And if so, how are we going to pre-teach it? Because when they're in the environment, kind of too late. So we need to set them up for success. We need to model. We need to role play. Maybe we do have that social story. This is what it's going to look like when you're coming into the classroom. Maybe we have a video model so they can get a picture of what it looks like before. You have a design space, you have your materials, you have your schedule, you know what's expected. That will naturally decrease your stress level.
Yep. If you walk into the best gen ed teacher's room that you've ever met, it is organized within an inch of their lives.
Right.
And that's why you love those rooms. That's why those students can access they know right where to put everything. That's why those rooms are so calming in many ways. Like, that's why you kind of obsess over those classrooms, right? That's why they look so like Instagram worthy of all the things, right? But that's what a lot of our classrooms should be going for. It doesn't mean they have to look Instagram worthy, but they should be really well organized, very clearly defined for how and when students should use different parts of the room, different spaces, different systems. And they should be differentiated for what the students need and how they communicate and what all those level of supports look like.
You hit on a good point, Teresa, differentiation, right?
Mhm.
I often think when we have students that come in to the inclusive setting, we're like, oh, they have to do what the whole class is doing. Do we, right? Or could we come in for the instruction and have a differentiated activity? So maybe instead of writing that paragraph out, I'm typing, or I'm matching, or I'm doing an alternative, and maybe we're doing 2 sentences instead of 5, right? And so thinking about how can we support our students, leveraging those strengths and differentiate the material so they can be as engaged and learn as much as possible.
There's a lot of different reasons why inclusion is appropriate and a lot of different target skills. It doesn't need to look exactly the same and serve exactly the same purpose for every student as to why the work is being done. And I think that we lose track of that. You have the exceptional learners who are way above the learning target that's identified for that day, and they're bored.
Right.
So differentiation looks like a lot of things, right?
I always see students that are done early, right?
Yeah.
And then they're sitting there and they're talking to their peer or doing something else. And example, great way to differentiate, have some student strengths or choice added.
Yep.
Maybe you have a choice board. When I'm done with my work, these are the activities that I can do. Build in those special interests. And
You can do it with structure.
You can do it, right? And we know those times are challenging and not everybody's going to be done at the same time. So think about the most challenging parts of your day. How can you introduce some of that structure, introduce some of those differentiated materials, which provide students some choice potentially, and really capitalize and leverage those student strengths and interests.
Yeah, if you really start tackling either with your gen ed teachers, depending on what your role is, but if you're really focused on inclusion, think about a transferable way to start tackling those gap skills, like the downtime, if you're finished early, or if there's a challenge with differentiating the activity. What are your students going to be doing during that downtime? Because downtime is the chaos inciter of all the universe,
It is.
right? So what are your students doing during downtime? Unstructured time equals chaos.
Yep.
There is no other response to that,
Right.
right? So how are you actively teaching the skill of what to do during downtime? And the best way that I've ever seen it tackled is using those string bags. They can move with the student. They can be structured on like hooks in a gen ed classroom. They can go in lockers. They can go anywhere that makes sense. You can build a place for them to be, but they can also be individualized per student, or they can have specific types of things in them that can be a station.
Yep.
And when you're done, go choose one and have it be time-based, have it be skill-based, have it be coping skills, have it be leisure skills, have it be work-based learning. Like, you can build those to be whatever you want to be, but it has a structure, it has a system, it has a plan, and you can teach them to be used in multiple settings and then transferred and generalized.
100%. 2 things I was thinking about as you were saying that. One being, we really want to be mindful of collaboration. And if I am that inclusive setting teacher, who do I leverage? I'm going to leverage the case manager, people that know the student well, so I can identify those activities. And then the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking about break systems or structured take a break is utilizing the CIN website, because people might not know what we're talking about. So that is a good way, if you're interested in that, to go check out the resources on that webpage.
Don't worry, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, look at us.
All right. So we have hit our time. And I'm going to make us wrap it up so that we get better at keeping our time close to that 15 minutes, because there's no way we'll ever be done in 10. So I'm just going to start naming that now. All right. So we talked about building on strengths and adult anchors, peer anchors, structuring the space, differentiating material, all the things, right?
Yeah.
as we are trying to do, we want to end with kind of something to reflect on. Our reflection point for this time is, what does inclusion look like for your students? Whatever your role is, what does it look like for your students? And what could you do to improve it?
I love it. It's simple, concrete, and manageable, right?
Yep. And that's all we wrote today.
See you later, sinners.
Bye.